UFC fight night, Strickland versus Magomedov, full card predictions. Starting at the bottom, working our way to the top. As always, first fight of the night is Alexander King Kong Romanov taking on Bogoy Ivanov. I'm going to go with Alexander Romanov in this fight. Um, I do think neither guy necessarily has amazing cardio. More so on the side of Romanov. Romanov's cardio was atrocious in his last fight against Alexander Volkov. Um, he had about 1 or 2 minutes of cardio, and then he just got gassed out and basically just gave up. Uh, I will say though, for the side of Romanov, he was fighting a guy like Volkov who is one of the top guys in the division, definitely like a top 10 guy. And I don't think Romanov's been exposed as someone that he's solid against lower level competition, but once he starts fighting the top guys, he usually tends to struggle a little bit. Now, the reason I'm picking him though to win this fight is because Bogoy Ivanov, despite him being one of like having one of the best chins and being one of the toughest guys, around, just the fact that he doesn't, Bogoy doesn't get knocked out or doesn't really get finished often, he isn't known to have a lot of output, which is typically what Romanov, one of his weaknesses is. Even if Romanov dominates the first round, he usually tends to slow down very, very much as the fight goes on in the second and the third round. Even in the fight against Marcin Tybura, he lost a majority decision. I thought it should have been a draw. He won the first round clearly 10-8 in my opinion. Lost the next two rounds because he was completely gassed. But Tybura's, I don't think Tybura is like the same as a Blagoy Ivanov. Blagoy Ivanov's not a guy that's going to push the action, push the pace. And I think Romanov will be able to get the takedowns in the first round, do what he has to do. Ivanov got taken down by Derek Lewis. Call it what you want, but if you're getting taken down by Derek Lewis, regardless of if, he caught Ivanov off guard with that takedown, still, you got taken down by Derek Lewis. I think Romanov can do the same thing. Romanov's like a bulldozer. He'll just run in there, try to like pick you up, slam you down, and he has some very weird submission, like forearm chokes on his record. Um, and like I said, he's been exposed recently for not being a complete fraud because he still can beat like the low level guys. I don't think Bogoy is like one of the worst in the UFC, but I just think, at 36 years old for Ivanov, um, Romanov should be the fighter that I would hope the UFC is trying to push here. They're giving him a winnable fight. He should be able to take down Ivanov. And if he takes him down one time in the first round, he should be able to stay on top the rest of the round. I don't see Ivanov getting back up if Romanov takes him down in the first. Um, and I do see Alexander Romanov winning this fight either in the first round or if it goes to the scorecards, I see him edging out a decision. Even if Ivanov starts picking it up a little bit in the later rounds, I don't think Ivanov's a guy that's going to really push the pace and try to, win those rounds by putting out a ton of volume. So I'm going to go with Romanov. If he loses this fight, I'm done with him. I'm done picking him if he loses against Ivanov, but I'm going to give him one last chance after he embarrassed me in the Volkov fight. Like it was sad watching Romanov just completely gas out and give up, but this is a fight that he can win. So give me Romanov in this one. Moving right along, we have Ivana Petrovic versus Guana Carolina. Um, Listen, I understand Ivana is 6-0. I understand that she's a favorite, and I understand it makes sense why she's a favorite just based off the record alone. And Luana Carolina hasn't looked amazing in the UFC. I know a common narrative this week has been her takedown defense. Is it going to hold up against Ivana? Listen, I'm picking Luana Carolina because Ivana's wrestling is not even JV. It's like middle school or elementary school wrestling. If you guys watch her last fight against Evelina Wozniak, let me just say, first of all, she got dropped with an elbow in the first round, right? She got dropped in the first round, lost the entire round, was just on her back. When I looked at her takedowns, like in the second and third round, stuff like that, her takedowns were very sloppy. She got the takedowns, but they were terrible. The entries were, like I said, elementary school wrestling. Like put her head down, put her arms out, and just charged at her opponent. not no semblance of actual wrestling, just like trying to just shoot a sloppy takedown. Um, and the sad part is it could actually work here because Lana Carolina, like this is such a low level fight that Ivana might be able to take her down with the elementary school takedowns. But honestly, I've seen there's middle school wrestlers out there that have better wrestling than Ivana Petrovic. If you watch her fight, her last fight, it's so bad. Her takedowns, they honestly look like they look like an 8-year old kid that it's his first year of wrestling and he's just charging at his opponent like a bull with his head down and just trying to grab him and take. It's terrible. So, and her striking is very bad as well. I just think this is a fight where even if Ivana wins, I don't think Luana Carolina should be a plus 180. I think this should be closer to a pick 'em, or at least, if Ivana's a favorite, maybe like a minus 150. But the fact that she's well over 2-1 favorite, I think it's like she's being way overvalued here. She hasn't fought really any great competition. If you look through her record, and Luana Carolina has her last five, Ariane Lipsky, she got submitted by a knee bar. That's a terrible look, but still, Poliana Battaglia won a split, beat Lupe Godinez. Granted, that was on short notice, and then her last two fights, Molly McCann, that was the London fight where she got knocked out cold. But I don't think Ivana's throwing spinning back elbows like Molly McCann is. And then she had a very competitive fight with a UFC veteran in Joanne Wood, who, like I said, has been in the UFC forever, training at a syndicate, towards the end of her career, but still an experienced UFC vet. So I don't think Luana is going to see everything that everything that Ivana's going to have for Luana. Luana's probably seen before, at least on some level. Um, and like I said, her wrestling is very amateur to me, and her so is her striking. So her grappling, if she does get on top, she'll probably be able to win the fight. But I got to go with the UFC vet. I just think the line's a little bit off, and for that reason, I'm gonna lean Luana Carolina. No confidence in this fight. I wouldn't bet this fight, but I'm just saying, as far as a pick, I'm gonna go with the one who has more experience, 8-4, 12 fights versus 6 fights. Luana has more experience. She should be the much better striker, and she should be able to defend the amateur takedowns of Ivana Petrovic. Next fight on the card is Guram Kutateladze versus Elvis Brenner. I'm going with Guram to win the fight. Now, look, um, that last Elvis Brenner fight was one of the worst decisions, honestly. I don't understand how they gave that fight to Brenner over Zubair Tukhugov. And by the way, Zubair Tukhugov was fat. Like, he was multiple pounds overweight in that fight. And he was a former 145er. Let's not forget, Zubair was a former 145er. He was fighting that on at 155. And Brenner did take the fight on short notice and won the fight. Like, he looked like I said, I think Zubaira won, but he did look pretty good. Brenner did on short notice, so I can't fault him for that. And he is a young fighter, only 25. Guram a little bit older at 31. But Guram's the overall better fighter. Brenner's doesn't really impress me that much. Um, shouldn't have won the fight against Zubaira Tukhugov, honestly. He is training out of shoot box, which is something that I have to take into account at least a little bit. The odds are not minus 400, by the way. Guram, I believe, is like a minus 700 now. So the odds have really widened. I don't think Guram should be a 7-1 favorite. I think that's a little bit disrespectful to Elvis Brenner because Brenner's, he's not a bad fighter, but overall, we got Guram, whose last two fights in the UFC have been, his only two fights in the UFC, I should say, have been against Mateus Gamrot and Damir Ismagulov. I'll get into Demir later. I'll get into him. He talked about retirement and all that. So I'll like I said, I'll get into him later. For now, though, that fight against Demir, that was before Demir even mentioned retirement, mentioned anything about giving up the sport. That was Demir, basically Demir in his prime. Demir in his prime. And Guram should have, in my opinion, should have won that fight. That was a very competitive fight. And Demir Ismagulov is a lot better of a striker than Elvis Brenner is. I don't see Brenner being able to take down Guram. I think the only way Guram loses this fight is if somehow the judges screw him over again, or not again. Well, I guess you could say again, but or give Brenner a unwarranted win, a win that he doesn't deserve. Granted, though, I think the minus 400 seems a little bit more reasonable. I really don't think Guram should be a minus 700. Minus 700 is a little bit absurd against a guy that's pretty good in Brenner. Not amazing. I think there's levels to this game, and I think Guram's on a different level. He's fought two guys that are both at that point when he fought Gamrot and Demir. Those guys were like kind of the dark horse type of guys of the division. Those were like the dangerous guys, the guys that nobody really wanted to fight. At the time, Gamrot was 17-0, and at the time, Demir was 23-1. So those guys were like really, really good guys that he was put in there with, and he had very competitive fights against both of them. And him not getting submitted by Gamrot or having a close fight with Gamrot, having a close fight with Demir, I think this is a step down in competition where Guram should be able to win, unless the judges somehow screw it up and give Brenner a win that he doesn't deserve again. So I'm going with Guram. Brenner's a solid fighter, though. I think even if he does lose this fight, he'll bounce back. Only 25 years old as well. Next is Yana Santos versus Carol Rosa. Um, I'm not gonna lie, this fight is not one that I really paid too much attention to as far as trying to analyze both their fight styles or anything like that. All I know is that Yana Santos got taken down in the second and third round and controlled for basically the entire round against Holly Holm. And Holly Holm's 41 now, so that's not necessarily a good look. Formerly Yana Kunitskaya as well. She married Thiago Santos, who Thiago Santos, just popped for steroids, looked terrible, or I don't want to say looked terrible. Maybe it's just Rob Wilkinson just looked really good in that PFL fight. But regardless, Yana Santos, how seriously is she taking this? I think she had a kid, which is why she took so much time off. I think that's why she took all that time off. I believe she did have a baby. So this is probably the tail end of her career. If she loses this fight, she's probably going to be, out of the UFC. And that's sure you can call it a narrative that, I'm basing this off just narratives, but you have to look at stuff like this. When you look at Yana Santos, like I said, how seriously is she taking it? How much does she want it compared to Carol Rosa? Because at the very least, Carol Rosa has been a lot more active. Norma Dumont lost to her, but she beat Lena Lance. Not the best, level of competition for Carol Rosa, but she's been in there. She's a younger fighter. I think she's the hungrier fighter. And Yana Santos is just, in my opinion, someone that doesn't really. I don't know if she's just showing up for a check. Maybe that's a little bit, incorrect for me to say. But I thought the same of, her husband, Thiago Santos, in the PFL fight. I didn't think he was showing up just for a check, but I didn't think his head was in the game as much as it should have been. I think the same of Yana Santos. Even if she's not showing up just for a check, how, is her head really in the game? Does she really want to win? Is she like putting 100% effort into this training camp, knowing that Thiago Santos is probably going to retire? She has kids. It's one of those things where I'm going to go with Carol Rosa just for that. Not really much about their actual fighting styles because no one honestly really cares about this fight, but Rosa's also the younger fighter, so I'll just pick her and call it a day there. Now this one, Joe Anderson Brito versus Weston Wilson. Man, this is going to be a slaughter. Weston Wilson is going to get mauled. Either either Joe Anderson Brito is going to do the same thing that he did in his last fight against Lucas Alexander, jumped on the back of Lucas Alexander, choked him out early in the first round. Either he's going to do that to Weston Wilson, because Janderson Brito is a strong dude. He's a strong 28 years old, so the much younger guy compared to the 34-year-old Weston Wilson. The odds indicate what's going to happen in this fight. Brito's a minus 1,400 favorite, which is all but guaranteed he's going to win. And he's going to win in the first round. Joe Anderson Brito is going to destroy this guy. Weston Wilson is also hittable. He's been knocked out with a left overhand uh, in his last loss against Teruto Ishihara. That knockout was he just his striking's not good. He does have decent jiu-jitsu, but it's not on the level of Brito. Brito's a lot stronger. He'll take his back and submit him if he wants to, or he'll throw an overhand. Brito does have very powerful overhands. He did clip and knock out Andre Fili, who's a much better fighter than Weston Wilson. So this fight's going to go one of two ways. Either Brito's going to knock Weston Wilson out with an overhand, or Joe Anderson Brito is just going to jump on Weston Wilson and strangle him in the first round. Not much to say there. It will be a first round finish for Brito. I expect him to win and win early. If Weston Wilson somehow survives or gets out of the first round, I think it's, regardless of how long the fight goes, that Brito's going to win the fight. Next is Kevin Lee versus Rinat Fakhretdinov. I'm going with Rinat Fakhretdinov. Look, Kevin Lee, I've mentioned narrative on the card before, and there's a few narratives throughout the card that you guys can possibly see. The Yana Santos fight. I'll get into the Demir versus Grant Dawson fight. This is another one where there's a narrative of how much is his head in the game, so to speak. How much is Kevin Lee really training for this fight? I'm sure he's training hard, but how is he really focused on 100%? I want to get that belt back, or not get the belt back necessarily, but you guys know what I mean. Get to the belt, I should say. Does he really want to get to the belt? He's kind of in between he's a big guy for 55, but he's a small guy for 70. Rinat Fakhretdinov he's a tank. That's just the truth. Rinat Fakhretdinov is an absolute tank of a man, and he doesn't get tired. Kevin Lee, good wrestler, has had a crazy knockout against Gregor Gillespie. That was an insane head kick KO. Gillespie was out cold, flatlined. That was an amazing win for Kevin Lee. And at the time, Greg Gillespie was undefeated. So great win there. But if you look throughout that was almost 4 years ago. And if you look at his last few fights, loses to Oliveira, no shame there. Loses to D-Rod, not too much shame in that. D-Rod's solid. And then his last fight was a little over a year ago against Diego Sanchez, where I heard he got hurt in that fight, but it was just not a good fight for him, not a good look. And Kevin Lee, now you're fighting Rinat Fakhretdinov, who does have some power in his hands in his own right. I do think Rinat can crack a little bit, as well as, obviously, his bread and butter is the wrestling and the grappling. Rinat Fakhretdinov, his bread and butter is, getting, pushing you up against the cage, or, just taking you down, getting on top, and mauling you, right? In his last fight against Brian Battle did take the fight on, a week's notice. But man, Brian Battle got mauled, and I'm not saying he got mauled, he got beat up, he got destroyed in that fight. Brian Battle stood zero chance anywhere the fight went. On the feet, he got dropped. On the ground, he got controlled for 14 minutes of a 15-minute fight against Rinat. 14 minutes of control time, plus Rinat dropped him. So not only did Rinat control him for the entirety of the fight, he also dropped him on the feet. He destroyed Brian Battle from pillar to post, made him look like he wasn't UFC level. He made Brian Battle look like he wasn't UFC level. Beat Andreas Michailidis as well, which isn't really the most impressive win, but still, he beat him fairly easily. All of Renat's basically the type of guy, you know what he's going to do. He's going to go out there, he's going to wrestle, he's going to test your grappling skills. And Kevin Lee could look pretty good early, but Kevin Lee, we've seen it time and time again. When he's forced to wrestle, when he's forced to grapple, he starts to tire out as the fight goes on. And I just don't see him being able to withstand the pace of Rinat Fakhretdinov. Rinat also has power on the feet. If Kevin Lee's not careful, Rinat could drop him, because Rinat is he's a tough dude. He's going to throw heavy on the feet and then just wrestle, get on top, control you. And even if Kevin Lee works his way back to his feet, Rinat's just going to drag him back down again and again and again. So the pick there is Rinat. even if Kevin Lee shows up and puts on a good performance early, I just think the cardio is he's not going to have the cardio to deal with a guy like Renat. He's not going to be, he's not going to have the ability to get up over and over if he's getting just taken down, slammed, especially in the later rounds by Renat. So give me Renat Fakhretdinov to win this one. Now, this is the first fight on the main card, and this is a really interesting one. It's Nursultan Ruzaboev versus Bruno Ferreira. Some of you guys might call me crazy here. Some of you guys might disagree with this pick. I know a lot of people are calling Nursultan a fraud. I don't think he is. I'm actually picking him to win in this fight. I'm picking Nursultan Ruzaboev to beat Bruno Ferreira. I don't understand the narrative that this guy Nursultan's a fraud. I really don't. First of all, he's training with the Philly guys now. He's training with Sean Brady, Joe Pfeiffer, Petrosky, Wells, like all those guys he's training with. So at the very least, I know he's getting good looks in sparring, very good looks in grappling. That gym is one of the best grappling gyms in the sport. It really is. If you just look at some of the guys, like I thought Sabatini was going to be in for a rough fight in his last one against Almeida. Sabatini completely mauled Almeida, made him look like a white belt, not a white belt, but you know what I mean. Made him look like he didn't deserve his black belt. Just completely dominated that fight. And we've seen Sean Brady, who, by the way, for those that don't know, Sean Brady is out of his fight versus Jack Della Maddalena next week. I was really looking forward to that fight, so sucks to see that. Hopefully, Sean Brady is healthy and recovering from whatever injury or whatever is wrong with him, and hopefully they end up rebooking that fight down the line. So, hopefully he ends up being okay with everything. But as far as this fight goes, Nursultan, he should have the grappling to compete with Bruno. Bruno has the power, but besides the power, I think if Nursultan can avoid that knockout, which is easier said than done. Don't get me wrong, it's easier said than done, but Nursultan also has power in his own right. He has power himself. So it's not a one-way street where, only Bruno can knock out Nursultan and Nursultan's just gonna get beat up by Bruno. No, like Nursultan can also knock out Bruno. And the grappling, I think Nursultan is improving in the grappling. He has quite a few. If you look through his record, Nursultan, he's 34-8, so he has well over 40 fights in his career. He's only 29 years old. The level of competition isn't the best, so that's why I understand why people are calling him a fraud. But if you look at the guy, he's won a ton of fights in a row, and he's not a guy that I think is, I think he's ready for a fight like this. Bruno Ferreira only 10-0, beat RoboCop, which is why he's a big favorite. But honestly, if he didn't beat RoboCop, or if he didn't knock out RoboCop, I should say, I think the line he would not be this much of a favorite. I think him knocking out RoboCop is making him a huge favorite in this fight. And RoboCop, I hate to say it, but he's a little bit chinny. Don't get me wrong, that was an incredible knockout. I'm not taking anything away from the knockout that Bruno had. It was a devastating KO. He put RoboCop's lights out, but RoboCop's hittable and he has been cracked before, so it's not like RoboCop is like he's impossible to KO or anything like that. It was a great win from Bruno, but I see a guy who has much more experience, over 40 professional fights, however you think of the competition. Bruno Ferreira, besides RoboCop, he hasn't really fought the greatest competition. He's fought decent competition as far as records go, but if you really look into these fights, I mean, he's not fighting like top UFC competition, whereas Nursultan's fighting like bums. Like, sure, Nursultan isn't fighting the best competition, but Bruno's not fighting top of the food chain guys either. So for that reason alone, I'm going to go with Nursultan here. I just think the line, similarly to another fight on the card, I think the line's a little bit off for the competition, or not the competition, the record that Nursultan has, being 34-8, being someone that's had that many fights and only 29 years old, training out of a very good gym, should have the grappling edge, and in the striking should be able to hold his own. He is the bigger guy, 6'4" to 5'10". So Bruno got to be careful at making his way in, like making his way in range, because Nursultan can clip him. Nursultan has plenty of knockouts on his record, so give me Nursultan Ruzaboev as an upset in his UFC debut on short notice as well. Next fight is Benoit Saint Denis versus Ismail Bonfim. I'm going with Ismail Bonfim. Benoit Saint Denis, he's a tough guy. He's a good grappler. I think his toughness is when your toughness is the number one attribute that people bring up. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing because if people are looking at you and they don't say, "Oh, he's a really good grappler, he's a really good boxer or kickboxer," when they look at him and say, "Oh, he's just really tough." Well, being tough is great, but you need more than just toughness to beat Ismail Bonfim. And I don't think his grappling's on the level to like completely dominate a guy like Bonfim or even knock him out. I think Saint Denis has, in a way, he reminds me of like Roman Dolidze in the striking, not in the grappling, but like in the striking, he reminds me of Roman Dolidze in a way. Just like I don't know what it is. It's just kind of in the fact that he's a little bit. I don't want to say um, too stiff on the feet because Delize has knockouts and Saint Denis has power and he's also knocked out guys before. So I don't want to say like they're stiff on the feet, but if you look at their striking, it's just not as fluid as Bonfim. Bonfim is a very very fluid striker. He knocked out Terrence McKinney with the flying knee, put him out cold, put his lights out. One of the best knockouts, at least of the year, if not of like honestly, that was an amazing KO. Like absolutely brutal, brutal knockout. And I think Bonfim's the real deal. Even in his contender series fight, he looked amazing against a 28-3 Abasov. I just think Benoit Saint Denis, tough dude, gonna be tough to finish. I don't expect Bonfim to be able to put his lights out because Saint Denis can take a ton of damage and still continue to push through it. But I just see Bonfim winning a decision. I see Bonfim just outclassing him on the feet, stopping the takedowns. I think he's the much more, as I've said, much more fluid striker. Saint Denis might throw some big, powerful hooks, but I just think Bonfim's going to get to the target quicker. Possibly use his jab, just keep Saint Denis off him and just start piecing him up. And I could see him just piecing him up for 3 rounds en route to a 30-27 win for Bonfim. He's the guy that is I think he could be top 15 or like top 10 level one day. He's only 27. He's very, very good. And St. Denis is good as well, but I don't think he's on this level. So give me Ismail Bonfim. Next up is Ariane Lipski versus Melissa Gatto. Another one that I'm not super thrilled as far as breaking down because the last fight that Lipski had, everyone was all over JJ Aldrich. Everyone was all over her. People were like, JJ Aldrich is going to beat Lipski easily. And then what happens? It's women's MMA, so Lipski goes out there and has the best performance of her career pretty much and beats JJ Aldrich fairly easily. And I'm just like, you can't predict this anymore. You can't predict fights like this. But Lipski has shown, she got knocked out against Priscilla Cachoeira in a minute. She beat Mandy Bohm, JJ Aldrich, and then she got ground and pounded by both Montana De La Rosa and a striker in Antonina Shevchenko, who's not very good. She got ground and pounded by Antonina Shevchenko is a striker, and not a very good grappler. And the fact that she got ground and pounded by her, now she's fighting Melissa Gatto, who Melissa Gatto's last fight was a year ago against Tracy Cortez, who Tracy Cortez is a really good wrestler. And Gatto did drag her down quite a few times, actually more than once at least. She dragged her to the ground. I could see the same thing happening here. Melissa Gatto just dragging Lipski down. Lipski's going to be working on her takedown defense, sure, but I just see Gatto just, getting her to the ground, controlling her, possibly finding a finish as, it happened against Antonina Shevchenko and Montana De La Rosa. So if they can do it, I believe Gatto can do it, who has shown a little bit of grappling upside. So I'm going to pick Melissa Gatto to beat Ariane Lipski. Although, like I said, Lipski did look good in the striking in that last fight against JJ Aldrich. Next is the featured fight of the night, and it is Max Payne Griffin versus Michael Morales. And this is an interesting one. I'm going to go with Michael Morales here. However, I do respect the skills of Max Griffin. Max Griffin's a dog, so you can never count him out. I'm not going to count out Max Griffin. I'm not going to say this is going to be a setup fight because it really is not a setup fight at all. This is a very tough challenge for the side of Morales. Morales is only 24 years old, but I think the age definitely will be a big factor in this fight. Max Griffin's 37, and he's not no spring chicken in the game. 19-9. He's a guy that's fought the much better competition without a doubt. If you look through the record of Max Griffin, he actually has quite a few good wins on his record. Won a split against Tim Means, loses a split against Neil Magny in his last two. Beats Carlos Condit, Kenan Song, Ramiz Brahimaj, and that win against Ramiz Brahimaj, he basically knocked Brahimaj's ear was hanging off his head because of that a brutal elbow by Max Griffin. So if Max Griffin can do stuff like that, I can't say I'm super confident in Morales because Morales is hittable, but he's a much younger guy. He's the better athlete. He has power, but I don't see him knocking out Morales. I just see Morales being the more explosive guy, the better athlete. He can wrestle if he has to, and I just see him winning this fight. I don't, like I said, this isn't a setup fight in any way because Max Griffin can win, but I just think Michael Morales, 24 versus 37, you have to, make that a something that really that matters, right? That matters. 24 versus 37. I think the UFC knows what they're doing here. It is a tough fight. It's not an easy fight. I said it like 5 times now, but it's true. This is the best opponent Morales has ever fought, but I think he's ready for this fight. I think he's shown improvements in all of his fights, and he's shown glimpses of like real that he can have success at higher levels. He's shown that in his last few fights. So I'm gonna go with the younger the younger guy, hungrier guy that is gonna be in better shape. The guy that's probably gonna I don't know if he's gonna be able to like hit harder than Max Griffin because Max Griffin does crack pretty hard, but should also have some wrestling upside. So I'm gonna go with Michael Morales to get it done as the prospect there. 14-0, undefeated as well. Co-main event of the evening is Damir Ismagulov versus Grant Dawson. Um, I really like this fight. I'm going with Grant Dawson though. I see a lot of people picking Damir, and when I mention narratives in the beginning of the video or throughout the video, I think this is a perfect example of a narrative that needs to be talked about. By the way, the lines are even. Demir is not a minus 155 anymore. The line is basically dead even. With Grant Dawson, he might even be a slight favorite at this point, but I'm going with Grant Dawson because Demir talked about retirement. When you contemplate retirement, I got burned last week with Zalgas. Um, I thought he fought the better competition. He's looked, pretty solid even in his losses. I thought he was going to be able to beat a short notice Joshua Van, who's 7-1, only 21 years old. And what happens? Joshua Van goes out there and looks amazing and beats him. Now, I don't think that has a ton to do with like the retirement angle of that fight, but this fight, I know for a fact Grant Dawson is all into his training. He is 100% focused, and he's training at an American Top Team. He was training out of James Krause's gym, Glory MMA. Now he's training, been training out of ATT for a little bit now. His last fight against Mark Madsen took him down, basically mauled Mark Madsen and finished him with a rear naked choke. Against Demir is going to have the much better striking. His jab is a thing of beauty. He does have very crisp boxing, very good jab, and overall the much better stand-up game than Grant Dawson. But Grant Dawson's been working with guys like Masvidal, guys, all those guys at ATT that have that striking. I'm sure Dustin Poirier's been working with a little bit. Like I'm sure he's been working with some of these top level strikers in the game that are training out of that gym. And Demir also used to train out of American Top Team. So there's a reason that Grant Dawson took this fight. If Grant Dawson trained with Demir at ATT and he thought, he's not winning this fight, or not that he's not winning this fight, but if he thought Grant Dawson, or if he thought Demir is giving him a tough challenge in the gym and getting the better of him, he probably wouldn't, be jumping on this fight. But he seems to be really focused on this fight. He seems to be knowing that if he wins this one, it's going to really propel him into that like top 15, maybe even top like 10 level guys that he's going to take on next. And Grant Dawson, I just see him being able to take down Demir. Demir has shown good takedown defense in the past against a few opponents, but in his last fight against Arman Sarukin's an amazing fighter, an amazing, amazing wrestler. But Demir just got taken down at will, basically, by Arman, and did try to work his way up and try to defend as well as he could. Didn't get submitted or anything like that. Didn't get finished, but lost the fight 30-27, and then decided he was going to retire after that fight. So when you think about retirement after losing one fight versus a guy like Grant Dawson, who hasn't fought the level of competition that Demir has, but has been improving constantly, is a better grappler, likes to get to the back, and getting to the back and like locking that body triangle in is one of the most effective moves, one of the most effective things you can do in MMA in this day and age. Aljo does it. There's plenty of other guys that do it. That's just one example, but Grant Dawson's another guy that does it. Grant Dawson likes getting in the back, and if he gets a body triangle locked in, regardless of what round it is, that's basically a round for Dawson. It's very difficult getting out of a body triangle. I don't think people realize how hard it is to escape a body triangle against someone that's a high level grappler. I don't see, if Demir does get body triangled here by Dawson in any round, I don't see him being able to escape it. So he must do whatever he can to keep this on the feet. As soon as Dawson gets to the back, he's going to lock in the body triangle and keep him there the whole round. And I really do think Dawson's going to be able to do that. His grappling's improved, training out of American Top Team with the better fighters. Demir not training out of ATT for this camp. And, Demir was training out of ATT, so the coaches know what his skill set is. They probably know he might lack in certain grappling departments, despite being such a good striker. And I really can't shake that out of my head that Demir decided he was going to retire and now he's back for one last fight. I don't like that. I don't like someone coming back for one last fight, especially against a guy like Grant Dawson, who I know, even if he gets tired, he's not going to quit. Like, he's going to just try. Even if he wins the first two rounds and he has to survive the third round, he'll do that. He did that against Ricky Glenn, which wasn't a great look for him, barely surviving. He almost lost against Ricky Glenn, but, I think right here it's one of those where he'll be able to, take down Demir. He'll be able to jump on the back and at least win two of the three rounds. So give me Grant Dawson to win this one. And lastly, the main event of the evening, another one where it's very, very intriguing. Sean Strickland and Abus Magomedov. The reason it's so intriguing to me between these two fighters is because, and I'll say, I was back and forth. I was really back and forth on this one for quite a while because, the way I see it, we don't know how good Magomedov is. For that reason, I have to go Strickland. I have to go Sean Strickland just because I don't know how good Abus Magomedov is yet. Now, if Abus Magomedov comes in here and knocks out Sean Strickland in the first round, then we understand how good this guy is. Then we understand that this guy's a top five, really top level guy. But right now, what we do know, we have to go off what we know. We can't judge saying, oh, Abus is going to do this because we haven't seen him compete 5 rounds in the UFC before. He's only had one UFC fight. He's had a few PFL fights before, but his first UFC fight was against Dustin Stoltzfus, and he front kicked him in the face and finished him in 20 seconds, which is, it was an incredible debut win. But that's Dustin Stoltzfus, okay? That's Dustin Stoltzfus. That's not Sean Strickland. And Sean Strickland does stand straight up and just walks basically. He keeps his head on the center line and stuff like that. So could he get front kicked in the face and finished by Magomedov in the first round? Possibly. But if he doesn't, which I would say there's not a there's a chance that Magomedov finishes him, but if Magomedov can't get him out of there early, Sean Strickland, I just see him winning the fight over 5 rounds. I think he's a guy that he knows what he has to do to win. He knows he's not knocking guys out. He knows he's not flatlining guys with one punch. He knows he's a guy that he's a volume striker. He loves 1-2s, pumping out the jab, and that's what he does best. He uses the jab, the 1-2s, straight punches. Um, Very, very good defense. Better defense than people give him credit for. I know he got knocked out by Alex Pereira and stuff, and that's sort of like, okay, he did get knocked out in the first round, but that's also by Pereira. That was by a beautiful left hook right on the chin. Do I see Magomedov being able to land a shot like that on a guy who's as defensively sound, as good on defense, and even as good on offense as Strickland? I doubt it. And as the fight goes on, I just see Strickland, starting to take over, and win the fight by decision. Um, as mentioned, Magomedov, we don't know how good he really is because he's only fought one UFC fight, and this is by far his biggest test of his career. For Strickland, I don't even think this might not even be the best guy Strickland's ever fought. We don't, like I said though, we don't know. We don't know how good Magomedov is, so this fight will tell me a lot. But just based off what I know, I'm gonna go with Sean Strickland. I know that he can go 5 rounds. He can throw more output. He can, 1-2. He can throw 1-2s for 3, 4, 5 hours if he has to. That's just the way he fights. He's always in the gym, always sparring, and he's sparring with some of the best guys out there. Chris Curtis, obviously, being his best friend, someone that he trains with a lot. So I think he kind of knows. Okay, I don't want to get hit by Magomedov early, but if I survive early, I should be able to take over and just put the volume on this guy and win a decision. So give me Sean Strick. And the wrestling is another thing that Magomedov could try to bring into this fight. But as we've seen with Sean Strickland is very good takedown defense and underrated grappling. I don't see Magomedov being able to take down Strickland and control him on the mat. So give me Sean Strickland here to win this fight. I think if you beat Sean Strickland, by the way, I think Strickland should have beaten Cannonier. I think Strickland beat Cannonier, and I also think that you have to be a dynamic guy to beat Strickland. And I just, could Magomedov be that dynamic guy? Maybe. But from what I've seen, I got to go with a guy that I know can go 5 hard rounds. I know can put out the volume. I know can land more strikes over the distance. So give me Sean Strickland in the main event. That rounds out the UFC Fight Night card. Thank you guys very much for watching. I appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.